Welcome to Roar, episode 4. And this is a show that wants you to encourage you to speak up and speak out in order to preserve our democracy. Because we're kind of afraid now that there might be repercussions if we rattle any cages. And, I grew up in the Vietnam area where we were, used to people protesting in order to change the government, change the direction of the policies in the government. And now there seems to be some sort of restraint on the individual rights of the United States citizens to be able to speak up and speak their minds. And so in the face of this, we're trying to get you to open your mouth. And I have Rick Rosner coming on to the show today to help me discuss what we're going to do about it. Hi, Rick.
Hey, when we were kids before the era of memes, there were sayings. And like one saying that just came to mind is from our youth is, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? And we've got the opposite situation here. We're all in the forest and about 5,000 trees are falling all around us. And does anybody notice the sound made by one frickin' falling tree? Case in point, tonight, the State of the Union. Trump is giving probably a 2-hour speech about how great everything is. Then there's an alternate State of the Union, the same way the Republicans did like a Kid Rock Super Bowl halftime show as an alternative to Bad Bunny. But the Dems are doing the same thing of a bunch of, celebs and politicians, each like saying their stuff. And then there's the Democratic rebuttal after the State of the Union given by Abigail, Sponberger or something, the governor of Virginia.
Right.
And is any of this going to change anyone's minds? I mean, I might watch the State of the Union, like the Epstein victims are going to be in the audience. And I think what people are hoping is that Trump will do something heinous, say something terrible that will actually cost him some support. When he sees them in the audience, he'll be some kind of dick. But really, is there anything that's so dickish that he can lose more support? And there's just so much. I've given up. I look at this. This is the giantest my beard's ever been. I'm just like, I don't comb my hair.
You're not taking care of yourself. Yeah.
No, freaking. I don't bathe very often. That's on purpose because I found out. I listened to Adam Carolla, who said that he, quit washing his hair very much. And, Carolla has all his hair, but I don't. These are transplants and stuff. Uh-huh. And they barely hang on. But I notice if I don't wash my hair, that my hair, it stays in. But like I'm an unkempt, unbathed, frickin'.
The unwashed masses. There you have it, Rick Rosner.
and I think I've said it on this show before, when my late mother-in-law, was starting to descend into Alzheimer's, she would explain away any, memory lapses, loss of words. She'd say, well, there's just a lot going on. Mm-hmm. And I say that all the time now. It's there. You don't have to have Alzheimer's to be freaking overwhelmed and confused.
Yes. This is a very great point that you bring up, that there's, I think if there's a scandal out there and we've become numb to it because it's just one after another. And we can't respond with outrage, which is what I remember from our youth. Watergate, for one example, caused some outrage. The way that the Vietnam War was handled, people would, take to the streets, they would march, they would sit in and protest. And, I don't see as much of that going on now. And it might be because we were part of a baby boomer generation. There just were more of us. So
they were killing us. That if you were unlucky enough to end up in Vietnam, that war killed 50,000 Americans.
Right. Not to mention 4 dead in Ohio. And, so there was, there was an awful lot of things that were seemed to me more dramatic. And that's part of what the show's about is saying that we cannot just sit back and watch our democracy slip away from us.
Yeah,
Now the Supreme
like okay, two cases in point. Do you even know that the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford is turned into a poop cruise off the coast of Iran?
oh gosh.
They have 4,500 sailors on that ship, and most of the toilets are broken. And so
Oh,
there's pee and poo like all over. Plus, they've been out there twice as long as a normal tour of sea duty, and so like the sailors are rebelling and are flushing T-shirts down the toilet to make it even worse because they want to go home.
right.
And the attack on Iran may be, well, I don't know if it delayed or changed because of poop. And that's just like, but if this had happened 20 years ago, it would be huge.
Yeah.
There's a documentary on a cruise ship that called Poop Cruise, but here it's happening again live and like it gets lost and everything else. Cash
I didn't
Patel,
know about it. Yeah.
Cash Patel, head of the FBI, like spends between $75,000 and $400,000 flying to Italy to hang out in the locker room with the gold medal men's Olympic team winning, the drink beer with them. He's just being a complete corrupt jackass. He'll probably skate on it. There is very little accountability because the guy we're roaring against, he controls all the levers of accountability.
Now the Supreme Court just did something. It was a 6-3 decision to annul his tariffs. Now the tariffs were a foolish idea to begin with, and they were essentially a tax on the American consumer because it wasn't the foreign countries that are paying this tariff. It was the importers, and the importers are passing it on to the American consumer. So these types of situations, which is essentially another tax, it's going to the federal government, and most people don't want their tax money or their money in general going to the federal government, and they're announcing it with great pride that they've raised so much in tariffs. What they've raised is a tax that is going unreported and unidentified as such.
Yeah, more than $1,000 per household.
And this is so I think it's going to be very difficult to tell the average American consumer who feels that pinch that everything is rosy.
Yeah, so they took in at least $133 billion through these tariffs, most of them from companies. Now, some companies would suck up some of the tariff charges for a while, and then from Americans if they pass the charges on. But American companies, American consumers, or I guess, and also foreign companies, but like, and they're reluctant to pay it back. And I bought something from England, a little like Giga for like, I don't know, like $80. A couple days later, I got hit with a $38 charge, $8 in tariffs, and $30 for the company charge to calculate how much the tariff would be. I don't think that money is ever coming back. And Trump, like the Supreme Court gave Trump an out. Trump imposed the tariffs last April. For the 8 months following that, the last 8 months of 2025, the U.S. added only 12,000 net new jobs, which is a 99% decline from previous years. It shut down. It doesn't lead to more jobs. It leads to fewer jobs. And Trump could have, but he doesn't have anybody around him to point this out. So he immediately said, well, I'm going to impose, all right, those tariffs were illegal. I found a new way to impose 10 and then 15% tariffs for the next 5 months. There's an emergency stopgap, temporary, there are like 5 different laws that let him try to impose tariffs. And he's an idiot, so he started at 10%. Then he said, he got even more pissed at the Supreme Court, said, we're going to go 15. Then he kind of ignored what he just said and went back to 10. This makes the stock market go crazy, not in a good way. But it's hard to keep up with.
It is hard to keep up with, and the Supreme Court will be front and center at the State of the Union. They'll be in the front row for his address, I believe. They're right in front of the speaker,
Yeah.
and the way he's been bad mouthing them. I wonder about their reaction. You mentioned the Epstein women; they're going to be there. The Supreme Court is, I guess 3 of them are in good standing with Trump, but the others may not be. And will he ignore them? Will he say something?
I don't know, but they know how to behave. You're not going to get any kind of interaction unless you got 2 crazy members of the Supreme Court. You got Alito and you got Clarence Thomas. But he likes them. But if he yells at the rest, but they're justices. They've been at their job. I think they will continue to have decorum. The only possible scenario where they violate decorum is if Trump starts yelling at the 6 who ruled against him. Then there's a chance that Alito and Thomas may go, yeah. But they know their part. They're not going to do that.
Right. No, that is part of their persona, and I don't think they'll break it, no matter what he says. The rest of the audience, of course, we remember them. People in the audience shouting out "You lie" when Obama was giving his State of the Union. So there have been breakdowns of decorum in that State of the Union addresses, and it might be interesting to watch it for that spectator sport type of thing. But I think I'm going to give it a healthy pass. I have a class at Stanford Continuing Education tonight anyway, so I have a previous commitment. Of course, I could record it, but I don't think I'm going to bother to do that.
Yeah, you'll read about the high low points and. But in this environment where everybody has a megaphone, how do you get any kind of attention for what you want to let people know? My wife has been she's written a book, and she's been taking a bunch of classes in how to edit it, how to publicize it. And because you've written a ton of books, it's as big a job to get attention in the marketplace for your book, maybe a bigger job than writing the book in the first place.
Right. There's so many books out there. How do you differentiate yours from anyone else's and get it? And people's attention span is very narrow, very short nowadays. And it's not a criticism. It's just a reality. People click on something and then they click on the next thing. You have to get them. And, so the way to stand out is to be flamboyant. As the news always said, it has to bleed to lead. But you have to get people's attention somehow and point them out to the books that they've written. Let's see if I can pull up a couple of examples. This is a book I wrote in 2023. This is a book I wrote first in 1996. It's still selling. It's in its 4th edition now.
It's got a brand, though. It's attached to the For Dummies brand.
And they have distribution muscle. So I didn't have to be the marketing guy. I didn't have to go push it. I didn't have to go on speaking engagements. I did.
You had to approch them, pitch them. You had to be their chess guy.
That's right. I wrote them a query letter, and then they asked for a sample chapter. I wrote that. They asked for a second chapter. I wrote that. And then I got a sit-down meeting, and that was what you wanted, to be able to be face-to-face across them. And they had skin in the game.
I'm sure it's not making you a millionaire, but it's you get checks every 3 months, 6 months?
6 months, yes.
Okay, and so it's been a steady earner because you had the gumption to be first to the For Dummies people with the chess.
Right. And it was one of those things, I just think it was the smartest thing I did in chess, although I did just about everything you can do in chess. That turned out to be the smartest because it was associated with the brand. And, that when people ask me for advice, like, for example, the other book that I published in 2025, No Blame, No Shame, it's not attached to a brand. And I don't know how to market it. I don't have a marketing.
Back in the year 2000, I was on the quiz show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Uh-huh.
and I lost on a question where they didn't have the correct answer.
Right.
They give you 4 answers. They left out the right one. Now, I wouldn't have known the right one, but in every previous case, because this happened like 8 other times where their research failed, they brought the person back. In my case, they were sick of bringing people back. They thought they had a semantic argument, and I was pissed. And I eventually sued them. But I thought, what can I do to, like, if I could just get the public attention on this, like, I think the injustice of it would, be persuasive. And so I thought about doing crazy. I mean, the craziest thing I did was I sued him while I was working for ABC, which is super nutty. But even nuttier was I thought about, I live in Studio City. Disney headquarters is in Burbank, like 5 miles away. I thought about chaining myself to the gate of the Disney Corporation, the producer of the show. That would have been bad. I would have gotten arrested. It wouldn't have been persuasive. But I considered it, and there is a nut, Laura Loomer, who's part of Trump's circle of advisors.
Yes,
and she is a nut, and she got kicked off of Twitter like 5 years ago, back when Twitter kicked off a-holes. Now they let them all on, and she went up to San Francisco and handcuffed herself to the door of Twitter, and it didn't make her letter. She was still barred from Twitter, and it didn't change anybody's mind about her, though. But I don't know, frickin'.
Yeah.
Now she's.
So what can we do? One is that we still have the power of vote, although they're trying to suppress the vote. There are a lot of actions that they took in the last election, and I think they've learned some things about what works and what doesn't work. And they're going to try to suppress the vote again in the coming elections. And there have been some special elections, including some surprising results from these special elections. It's surprising in the sense that a Texas Republican lost to a Democrat, and that was hard to believe that Texas was that, but they were that outraged. And we'll see results in Louisiana, for example. And so these tariffs are unpopular, even though I'm not sure the average voter has the ability to realize that they're being taxed. They just know that they're feeling the pinch.
They know that a bag of coffee was $10 a year ago, and now it's $19.
That's staggering.
Yeah.
And tariffs have the result of raising prices and also narrowing your choices. So, they won't import things that they're going to have to pay these tariffs on and price them out of the competitive marketplace. So,
with voting, there is no voter fraud. The Heritage Foundation, we know the Heritage Foundation, right?
If there was voter fraud, they would have found it and they would be publicizing it.
Well, no, the deal, they're the people who came up with Trump's whole platform, everything he does.
Yeah.
Except, he does a lot of stuff out of self-interest, but everything he does politically is from the Heritage Foundation. They're very conservative and like kind of unscrupulous, but they have an election integrity project, and it has a database, and they've looked at every vote cast over the past 40 years and every documented instance of somebody illegally casting a vote. And out of 2 billion total votes cast in America over the past few decades, they've only found 2,000 votes cast illegally, including just 77 cast by illegal immigrants. So that's a rate, 2,000 over 2 billion. If you do the math, that's a rate of 1 in a million. It's not a crime people do. I talk about this a lot, that if you drive in LA, if somebody's driving under the speed limit, they're likely Mexican because they don't want to get in trouble. Or they might be an older black person who, again, has been pulled over 5 times for nothing in their life. And so they're going to drive a few miles under the speed, give cops no excuse to pull them over. And if you think that any of those people are going to
illegally
jeopardize.
cast their vote to get themselves in trouble.
It's high risk. If you illegally cast a vote, you can go to prison for 2, 3, 5 years. And that's the risk. The reward is, oh, well, your wife's dead. You voted on her vote by mail ballot. You've cast one more vote for the people you like out of hundreds of thousands. It's low reward. Right. So people don't do it, except for the occasional idiot or the occasional person who gets bad advice. There's a woman who's in prison in Texas because she got out of prison. She did some bad stuff. She got out. She wanted to vote. She asked election officials, hey, now that I'm out, can I vote? And they're like, yeah, we think so. She votes. Turns out she got bad advice, back to prison. But there's not a giant enterprise to.
It's a simple miscarriage of justice. And in that case, and in others, they get blown up out of proportion. And Trump will talk about voter fraud through the mail. He's trying to suppress vote by mail, which I've done for decades, and others that I know, it's just an easier way to sit down and vote, in a calm manner. And, you can do your own research, you can take your time and all that kind of stuff. But he doesn't like it, and he wants to suppress it. And will that force more people to the polls? Probably, if he can get away with it, which he's trying to. Who knows? I never put anything past him. But right now, I'm still eligible to vote by mail, and that's the way I will vote.
Yeah, and in California will like, the SAVE Act, one of the biggest demographics that will have a problem voting is newly registered married women. Because if the SAVE Act passes, you will have to show a paper trail showing that you're a citizen, which means
the House passed. The House passed the SAVE Act. The House passed.
Did. The
Senate has to confirm it, right?
But so if it passes, then, and you want to vote and you've never voted before, if you've already registered, you might be okay. But if you're a new voter, then you have to dig up your birth certificate, or you need to have a passport. Passports cost about $150. They take several months to get. So, and not a lot, and if you're not traveling out of the country, why would you spend that much money?
Yeah. To get a passport would be like getting signing a poll tax, and that's been frowned on for decades.
Right. So my wife's coming home. The dog is going to bark at her like for a little bit. So that's just what's happening.
Yeah. Okay.
But so if you don't want to spend $150 on a passport, you have to dig up your birth certificate or request a new one, which is probably $10. Then you have to request your marriage certificate if you can't find it. If you've been married 12 years, you don't know where your marriage license is.
Right. I asked my wife. We don't know. Yeah.
And then you have to have your driver's license, and then you have to show up, I guess, at your polling place, or I don't know, at the county clerk registrar's office with all these things to prove you are who you are and that you were born in the U.S.
Right.
And they think that because women tend to vote more Democratic than men vote more for Republicans than women do, that this will suppress some of the Democratic vote. Right.
Which is the entire rationale behind it. They're all the things that they're targeting are this is why they got it a little bit educated doing it last election, and this election they're clearly more targeted, and they're doing things that have a chance of working when and not doing things that failed last time. So I just think they're getting better at it, but there's no question, and they're trying to suppress the vote, and this is of course. Against everything the Constitution stands for. We always believe the more people voting, the better. That was the spirit of democracy upon which the country was founded. Every citizen has a right to vote, and they of a certain age. And that it's like these types of things. I don't know. Again, if it's just me, or I don't hear the outrage about this that I personally feel,
because it's a little complicated. Because like. The Republicans say it's the SAVE Act. It's to save the integrity of the vote. And they say, why are Democrats against, voting integrity? Why
Right.
are they? And that's the simple message. And then you can say, well, this doesn't do that. This does a lot of other stuff. And also, there's no real voter fraud. And by then, they've already said, A, you're full of shit, and B, this is boring. And so I don't know how you get the message out.
I was asked.
And 3, it's already illegal. You don't need another law on top of a law.
Right. And I was asked by a Trump supporter, don't I want to make America great again? And I said, MAGA is a bumper sticker. It's not a well thought out proposition. It's not policy. Making America great again is the details matter, and it's not a slogan that's going to turn the country.
Short and simple wins.
But short and simple does seem to stick in people's minds.
Nike, just do it. It's 8 letters.
Yes.
Like TV theme songs. Nobody wants to watch a TV theme song anymore. Like Lost, I think, was one of the first. Hello. I did feed the dog. Yes. The dog got fed an extra meal a couple days ago because we didn't coordinate on the. But
the dog didn't complain.
All right, the show Lost, which is, I don't know, that show's probably close to 20 years old now. They didn't have a theme song. They had a theme tone. They had a whoosh, and that was enough for people. Now, you're lucky to get a 3-second theme song, compared to Gilligan's Island, which was a minute long.
Remember that.
It was a 3-hour tour.
Yeah. So. Hey, what was Gilligan's first name?
I forget. I know the professor's name. Yeah, got his name out of a phone book, and there was speculation that he did have a first. They never. Yeah, you're right. They never said it. The professor's real name was Roy Hinckley.
Uh-huh.
And the last survivor, the movie star, is the last castaway. She's the sole living castaway now. Tina Louise.
Oh yeah,
Tina Louise, the ginger.
Louise.
Yeah.
You always said Ginger or Marianne, and everybody was obligated to say Marianne.
Yeah, but so we used to watch fireworks every year. We're close to the movie lot where they filmed it, and we used to go. They had fireworks at the movie studio. Would do a fireworks display every 4th of July, and we found out that the best place to lie on the ground was a grassy field, so you could look straight up. And that grassy field used to be Gilligan's Lagoon.
Ah,
but they quit doing the fireworks, and they built a whole new building on the lot, and it's called the Lagoon Building, and it's got that same font on that Gilligan's Island. It's fun to live in Los Angeles because you get this entertainment-y stuff. You go to CVS and you can see Natalie Merchant, buying whatever.
Yeah. I agree. That is something that is pro LA. I don't think the current government likes Los Angeles very much, though. And they haven't really hit the San Francisco Bay Area with ICE agents or anything like that. I wonder if
they figured out their strategy. They'll pick on smaller cities. Minneapolis is like 430,000 people. It takes 600 cops to patrol Minneapolis. But they flooded it with close to 3,000 Border Patrol and ICE troops, and overwhelmed local authorities.
Right.
When they tried that in LA, it didn't go so well for them because LA is a city of 4 million plus another 4 million on the outskirts. There were,
right.
They said that the rioters were burning down Los Angeles. Well, any kind of unrest was a couple blocks, And what they did is they burned Waymos. They burned down 5. A Waymo is one of those driverless. You've got them all over San Francisco.
Yes.
So the rioters or the protesters, some of them would order up a Waymo. It shows up, and then they'd set it on fire. Waymos are defenseless. It's not part of their skill set to run away from people trying to burn them down. But that was the extent of it. That 5 Waymos got set on fire, and Trump was saying, the whole city's like, erupting in unrest, and the millions of people here were called bullshit on it, and
and they could document it too. The people, everyone has a cell phone. I can still remember the cop. You'll remind me of the details of it. The cop was pressing his knee against someone's neck and killing him. And
George Floyd, that George Floyd's murder happened like a mile away from the Renee Good murder and the Alex Pretty murder. It all happened in roughly the same.
And people had it on their cell phones, and that's why he got convicted. That's
also because it took 9.5 minutes for him to kill the guy. He knelt on his neck for more than 9 minutes,
and he was looking around like, "You got something to say? You want to make me take my knee off him?"
But that makes the point of like what gets outrage and coverage. So I mean, there's plenty of video of Renee Good getting murdered, but the whole thing takes from the first. He shot 3 times, and from the first shot to the last took 2/3 of a second. Pow, pow, pow. And it's not 9.5 minutes of slow murder. It was fast murder, and it's subject to people bullshitting about it and people having different interpretations. I like the cop, Jonathan Ross, the ICE guy, claimed that that he was injured, that she hit him with her car, and she was driving a Honda Pilot, and I went to a parking lot, and I found a couple Honda Pilots to see if there was any physical way for him to have the injuries he claimed by getting hit by the Honda Pilot. Impossible. And I think because the bumper hits you at your knees. The bumper is 9 inches ahead of the rest of the vehicle, and it's not like a truck that's all boxy. It's curved like a car, even though it's kind of high above the ground. There's no way that you can get unless you throw yourself flat on the hood. You can't get contact between your chest and the car. So just totally full of crap. But will that ever be investigated? I don't know. But if you're going to get murdered by law enforcement, and you want people to be outraged, you want a slow murder. You want your killing to take 9.5 minutes, so it's unequivocal. I mean, even then they said that the kneeling on the neck wasn't what killed him. It was
cause of death. Yeah,
he was on drugs. Yeah, it's like,
and he had a heart attack or something. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And this is the thing about the State of the Union. There are people that are going to believe what they're told, and I don't know what you can do about that. And if they just believe it, take it hook, line, and sinker, there's not much to be said for changing their minds. So that's why the people that really understand that this is not necessarily the truth, and what they might have to do is check other sources for information, and show up and vote and throw the bums out for crying out.
There are 2 demographics that support the president regardless of the president. There are the people who don't pay much attention, which they're largely independents, and they just don't. They have other things to pay attention to. Or they may lack the ability to pay attention, but there are probably 15, 20 million seniors in America who still vote, but who are losing their shit a little bit. You know, like we're of the age where, like, my wife is now kind of watching me, like to see if I'm starting to lose my shit. Like if I call the dog by the other dog's name,
Yeah.
I've got this locked finger on my hand. This it's trigger finger. I have dropped a couple dishes in the past couple weeks. One was because I went to grab something, my dumb finger got in the way, and she's wondering, I think, a little bit like, uh-oh, is this the beginning of like his decline?
Yeah.
But at our age, there are people who, and you know, people 10 years older who are a little bit in decline. And if they end up sitting in front of Fox News, they will buy it all. So the people who aren't paying attention.
I can't straighten my pinky finger because of an injury, but it seems less of a problem than the one you have. That would get in the way.
Mine's okay. It gives me something to play with. It's like, and yeah, it's like a 5-minute surgery where they release the thing that's locking up. But I just don't want the weeks of recuperation. But anyway, that's one demo. People not paying attention. Right. And then there are the respect for institutions people. There's a solid 30% of Americans who are like, he's the president. And yeah, he may be kind of a dick, but he's the president. And I support, you know, our American system. We elected him. We owe him our support. It's hard to
hear that argument. And, you know, you must remember, I know I do, that Richard Nixon came on the air and said, when the president does it, it's not a crime. And, you know, we didn't buy it back then, but people seem to be buying it a little bit more this go around.
The people who told Nixon that he had to resign were from his own party. They said, if this goes to if you get impeached and it goes to the Senate, we will vote you out of office.
Barry Goldwater couldn't have been more respected on the right. I mean, he was a very conservative senator, and when he lost
ultra right wing, almost a nut, Barry Goldwater. Yeah. He was so like hardcore to the right. Of course, now he'd be almost mainstream among MAGA. But his own party had the decorum and the respect for institutions. And Nixon himself probably, you know, when he heard the news, he respected their word and he got out of there. And now everybody's, there's this Tony Gonzalez. This is a member of the House of Representatives out of Texas. Tony has an affair with one of his aides. And he also sends her emails or text messages saying, give me some naked pictures. Also, what are your favorite sex positions? At some point, the woman, she gets caught having the affair by her husband. She covers herself with gasoline, lights a match, kills herself. Wow. Brutally. And this just broke. And 3 Republican congresswomen, or Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert, and are saying this guy has to leave. But the rest of and all the Democrats are saying, of course he's got to leave. He drove his aide to a brutal suicide. Though there are alternate points of view that it wasn't. I mean, some people are saying, yeah, it wasn't because of what happened with the congressman. It's because her husband was screwing her. Anyway, it's a mess. And yeah, under normal circumstances, he would resign. But
that's the kind of thing that
the Speaker of the House wants him.
Yeah. There have been government officials in other countries that have been forced to resign because they are in the Epstein files.
Yeah, but they're stonewalling on this guy who possibly drove a woman to burn herself to death because they have the slimmest possible voting margin. They
can't afford to lose one. Yeah.
They can't afford to lose a guy, even if the guy is a piece of crap.
And and sleeping with your aide, it brings up Monica Lewinsky. It brings up all these things that used to cause outrage, and now people are just shrugging their shoulders. I don't understand.
Gary Hart. Remember Gary Hart?
I sure do.
He was the first guy.
Yeah.
But before Gary Hart, I think this happened in the late 70s. He was a very charismatic presidential candidate who was found out to be having an affair aboard a yacht called the Monkey Business.
Mm-hmm.
And the press, all of a sudden, they used to wouldn't report on affairs. Like everybody, I guess everybody in the press knew that JFK was banging. JFK had a bang room in the basement where he would take people to have sex with them. But all of a sudden, the late 70s, they decided Gary Hart was fair game. They revealed the affair, and he quit the campaign.
Yeah.
Now if this happened, he would say, "No, I'm sorry. It was a lapse in judgment.
Yeah.
I apologize." And Trump had affairs with his second wife and his third wife while he was still with his previous wives. There'd be he hasn't apologized for anything in that.
Yeah, there has been no accountability throughout his life. 6 bankruptcies, 30 plus felonies. He's been convicted, yet where is the accountability? And so he's gotten the sense that there is none, and he can do.
And so nothing. They're still sitting on 3 million Epstein files that we can. It's 100% certain that a lot of those documents show that Trump was. Now, Trump, 28 adult women have accused Trump of either rape or sexual harassment or assault. But Trump is not, in my mind, a penis rapist. Like, he's not a guy who jams when he was found liable by a jury, he was found liable for digital penetration for his fingers. So Trump is a power rapist where he just wants to humiliate the woman.
Right.
And so that speaks to what might or might not be in the Epstein files about Trump. May not have been having sex with the underage girls. He may have just been peeping at them and groping them, but we don't know. But anyway, beyond, there's no, in the docs that have been released so far, there's little documentation of him having contact with these underage girls. But as I said, there are 28 women, including his first wife, who have credibly accused him of sexual offenses against them. And these are women who, not psychos, right, upstanding women who have nothing to gain by coming forward. But none of that made a freaking difference.
Yeah.
None of it.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me, but tell me if I'm fooling myself when I say something like this. What's wrong with this country can be fixed by what's right with this country.
That's been the case we're about to celebrate our 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and that has been true historically. It's crazy when you look back at the Civil War. The Civil War killed 750,000 Americans. Like 3% of the population, more than any other, a higher percentage than any other thing in history. A terrible, terrible freaking event. Yet Lincoln, who prosecuted the war, is considered our greatest president, even though he presided over the greatest slaughter. And because it was a winning bet, he preserved the Union. He kept America together. And right, what's wrong with America, which back then was a bunch of assholes decided to break away so they could keep having slaves. And he brought the hammer down on them. And we remained a country, and we're better off as one country. We have, we have all sorts of power, both economic and moral power as a single nation. though, our moral power is compromised right now. But
Yes,
look at the history. We faced insane situations, and we've come through them and have, remained perfectible. The Trump wants to get rid of a lot of evidence that we've done bad shit in the past. And then the libs say, no, keep the evidence. People need to know this stuff. But the framing is, yeah, we did bad stuff, but we strive to do better.
Right.
And we can hope
it's like
that we will.
Martin Luther King, the arc of the future is progress.
The arc of the moral universe bends towards justice.
Right.
And we're hopeful that remains the case, though it's more up in the air because we've never had as big a dick as president as Trump, and because AI is going to outthink us. For the first time in a century, the average IQ of all humans is going down. For the 50 years after, there's a thing called the Flynn effect. For the 50 years after World War II, the average IQ of all of humanity went up by 15 points because cultural literacy, because TV spread to cover the planet, radio spread to cover the planet, phones, just as people became more literate, more knowledgeable, they became smarter. The whole planet became smarter. But now we're outsourcing our thinking to our devices, and we're getting dumber.
That's a topic for another show. We're going to end this one, but I want to give you a hand for roaring today. You did a great job, and I will hopefully see you next week, and we can talk about AI, which is a tremendous, interesting topic for me, and deserves more than the time that we have to talk.
Yeah, let's do AI. Yeah, my wife says, "Why are you so loud?" And
he's roaring.
All right.
All right, Rick. Thanks again. Okay, that was Rick Rosner helping me to help you to get your voice heard. Speak up, speak out, and help preserve our democracy. If you want to see this and other episodes, you should go to airu.tv, the website that has all the previous episodes and some previous seasons that Rick and I have been on. And also, let's see if I can do this. Yeah, if you want to write to us and ask us a question or tell us what to talk about, just write to us at info@airu.tv. And we'll be happy to discuss whatever it is that the topic is that's keeping you up at night, stressing you out, or giving you reason to stay quiet and not open your mouth. Okay, thank you for watching. And we will be back next week at the same time, right? Reasonably the same time, and certainly the same channel. So thanks again.